Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, April 29th, 2024. My name is John Pieranunzi, and this is the opening swing. The opening swing is a brief game plan for active traders of the futures markets, specifically the S&P 500, but soon to add other futures. Let's begin today, as we always do, with our news. So out of Europe, we had the German inflation rate, came out mostly in line. That was about it. Other than that, pretty quiet. Today, out of the U.S., we have at 10:30 Eastern, the Dallas Fed manufacturing. It's a regional Fed survey. Not really a big deal. Treasury refunding financing estimates at 3 p.m. Also not really a big deal for us. A few 3- and 6-month auctions. Overall, today is very light. Today's light. The rest of the week is busy. Most notably, the FOMC announcement at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, and our employment situation on Friday. And along with that, we have some other figures coming out. So this is a very busy week. Lighter on Monday. Normally what you think on a week like this is, oh, it's going to be slow and then it'll be busy. Often that's the case, but sometimes, I'm just flagging, sometimes when you have heavy data later in the week and a light Monday, sometimes you see a little bit more action than what you'd expect on Monday because there's positioning ahead of data later in the week. So I'm just kind of flagging that possibility today. Let's go on to our charts. Here's our monthly chart, full session monthly candles of the S&P 500 back adjusted. The key to this chart is consecutive higher lows, which we call one time framing. Strong bull market, price discovery higher. We saw that change last month with the break of the prior month's low, which is the 26 halves. We talked about this a lot. We saw that break and then recover, and we've settled above the prior month's low on Friday. This monthly candle has a higher low and a higher high and a lower low than the prior month, which breaks the trend and says that now, at least to me, on this monthly time frame, we have actually entered balance as of right now. So that's what I'm looking at on this time frame. It also makes sense seasonally. Summer sometimes gets a little quiet. We've had a lot of action. I would not be surprised to see some tempering of that action into the summer, and then ideally a busy fall. That's what we'd all hope for as traders. Looking at our weekly chart, we began looking at the weekly chart after we examined the possibility that this could be our April low. We have 2 days left in April. We began to look at the possibility of, if that's our April low, then is this our weekly low? And if that's the case, then do we get an inside week, which is what we got, or we examined the possibility of a run at this 52.13 quarter high, which we did not get. So we got an inside week. The question that then we begin this week with is, what do we do today? Do we break this high during RTH? We've already tested a few points above it. So do we continue to get excursion above this high and start to work higher, or do we roll back over to the prior week's range? That's the big question here. Let's go to our daily. Here's our daily chart, full session candles again. Reiterating a lot of the things that we've discussed, this is our prior month's low, which was a key LIS for the sellers. We saw this area resisted until we made this low on news, and then have since started to recover higher. Pushing back into this area, we saw initial resistance, which makes sense. Tried higher, and we got a very significant push deeper, which still found buyers. Makes this low a little bit more significant to me. And then we were able to get right back to this key area and hold. So that's a strong showing from the buyers, settling above the prior month's low. And we're holding these prices. We've held these prices since the Sunday reopen, and we're just sort of sticking here right now. So once again, the big thing, the big pieces here that we're looking at today is, do we hold above this prior week, prior day's range, and continue to grind into this area? My initial key target was 50 to 55, really 50 to 60. Then we have the 67s up here which we had talked about several weeks ago, is a key area. So those are the key places above. Do we push through and continue to grind above the key 5150 area and start to take out the 55s and 60s? Above 50, 67 becomes key. Above 67, we start to look at the 91s, which begins an HVN up here. As you can see, we have this HVN, which is our MCV POC of the region. There's a magnet zone there. It's also in confluence with our prior low of day. And then in the profile, we have this key LVN, which is where the 5150 figure comes from. It's why I'm paying attention to it. And then pushing through this key sort of LIS LVN area, we have our 67s, which is the upper balance that we were rejected from. So those are the big pieces here. Just in very broad strokes, what am I looking for today? What's this next candle going to look like? For me, I'm looking at the possibilities that first, I'm expecting an attempt, a grind higher, at least initially. And then the question will be, how does that grind higher release? Does it release lower back into this prior balance to kind of try to pick up more buyers? So do we grind and release lower, or do we grind and release higher to take out these 50s, 55s, and then potentially 67s? Those are kind of the broad possibilities I'm looking for today. A grind that just continues to grind and settles quietly. I think that's a little less likely. Or we may see a grind that begins to release one way or another. Let's move on to our smaller time frame charts to discuss a little bit of price action. This is our hourly chart. We'll take a quick look at it just to go over some of the territory in this balance. Now we paid a lot of attention to this blue area, which I thought was which is the area that I expected to be resisted the most. It was, and we got our news low out of it. Now with this news low, to me, it really looked like the Millennium 5K figure, very psychological. That was really where the buying shut off. This was like panic selling, and then this is where the bid came back in and we rejected prices below the Millennium figure. This rust-colored area is basically the 37s up to the 60s, including the key 50-50 strike. It's also the midpoint of this recent balance. This is an area that prices below this rust-colored area were rejected for higher. We took out the high. On a retest, we found rejection once again below. So this is an area the buyers have kind of claimed this as of right now. Looking higher up here, we have our key prior month's low figure, the 26 halves, in this little band, 24 to 28 and 3/4. That's a very key area here. And then below this area, 5100s to around 06, prior day's RTH low. This was an important test that was rejected for higher prices. So here below, we have the 24s and 28s, key area we've talked about a lot. Then we have yesterday's low. Below there, we have this red area, which I've marked as about 64 to 85, which is really the overnight zipper that we had on this day. That's a key area to me because we had this expected resistance here. This is where the bid showed up. The bid was defeated, but prices below were rejected. So I'm looking at this area as claimed by the buyers. I mean, claimed by the buyers, but I'm looking at this as actually claimed by the buyers as well. So if we get below yesterday's RTH low today, I'm looking at this as support if we continue. This area is support for a potential reversion and another higher low if we get below there. Let's go on to the PNF chart and discuss price action on a more granular level. Okay, this is a 12-box PNF. Let's discuss some possible scenarios for price action today. All right, so I feel like we continue higher today. That's my primary. I think it could happen quickly and early, potentially pre-open. So my strongest expectation is that we see price kind of hold. I don't think it'll get below the prior month's low on this move. I could see it just sort of holding, respecting this prior month's low on any tests, and then just continuing to push higher into this area in a very kind of like grindy sort of way into these 50s. And I could see this continuing as high up until about the 65s. But really the area that gets to be questionable to me is anything above 50 to the 65s. That's an area where things start to get questionable. And so I'm thinking potentially a grind up into this area, hit some resistance, and then roll over back to the prior day's high. That will be a decision zone. So key idea, grind higher to this. Then we see potentially some reversion to the prior RTH high. That would be a decision area where we may continue, get back to the high, and continue to push. That's one idea. That's a very bullish idea. Or we may have this high put in and it holds, in which case we'd see a lower high and potentially reversion lower, retest back down to this area. We're back into balance, somewhere back into the prior day's range, and see a quiet settlement potentially within the prior day's range. So we have, primary idea, grind higher, get to the 65s. 65s are a question mark. And then at 65s, we may revert lower. There's a possibility to then, if the bulls are strong enough, reiterate the support in yesterday's RTH range to continue and settle above. Or option 2, we get this test and then we fall back into range and we trade quietly within this range. The third possibility, which could happen, although it would probably be quite a bit of range, is if we get this test, fail, and then fall below the prior day's range. That would be a lot of range today, probably more than is reasonable to expect, but it's possible, and that would just be some excursion below here that may or may not get this target. But that's a possibility. This is really my most primary idea today. What are some other ways it could happen? Let's look at another way. So we could also get a test, an early test that kind of falls beneath this, gives some type of a like push below that is unlikely to maybe get here, preserves this low, but then gives a quick reversion above the prior settle, and then goes on to follow exactly the same path. That's a possibility. I'm thinking this, and then, obviously right here, either of the things we said could happen. So I'm thinking this is less likely because I think it'd be too good. Like I think that if we make a test lower that preserves this low, it would almost be too good of an opportunity. But it could happen. But for me, if we get something like this, keys would be preserving this low and then rejecting back above settle. That's how I would know that we're good to go long. Is if this test happens, this low is preserved, but then we're quickly above settle and participants continue to lift above settle. That's how I would look at that. Once again, that would be a little less likely. Hopefully we get it, but you never know. All right, so what are some ways that this could break bearishly? Let's take a look. Okay, so the key way that I think that this could break bearishly, we've already gotten a test above this prior high, which is yesterday's high. So if we get another test, or if this overnight high holds, like another test that doesn't go anywhere, or this high holds and we start pressuring into settlement, that would start to look pretty bearish for me. Like a high, a weak break, and then either another weak break that isn't retested, or we don't get back to these highs and we start pressuring settle. That gets pretty bearish to me, and I'd start to think we are going to take out settle and we might continue lower. In that case, that would still leave us enough range that we might get down and test this low and kind of bang around beneath it, and then end up potentially either A, getting back into this area, maybe returning to settlement or the prior month's low, or here, of course, we could break lower, fail to get back into the prior day's range, and then get into these 85s region, which would be my key target. This is one vol sig down. This would be the key target for me. Well, this would be the initial target. This is our initial test. Then this is our initial target. Secondary target, 85s. Tertiary target, 75s, and then extended targets would start to get into the 60s or anything in this area. This is very possible today. Either of those scenarios are possible, in my opinion. So what would it look like if we did like nothing today? Well, I think we already know. The nothing scenario would exist in this universe, which is roughly 26s up to 64s. Pretty broad range, about 40 points. That's been normal for us. This would be the nothing scenario. So the nothing scenario, it could happen. We push up to there, we fall back, we hold. We could kind of give a quick test lower and hold. Any of this, in which case the trading in this area would be what I would call sort of scalping for stats, which is just looking for expected tests, not really looking for any type of meaningful excursion. I would be a little lighter and tighter with risk if we stay trapped in this area, which would probably be the most difficult trade in my opinion. I want to flag something else before we wrap it up today, and that is that once again, we have a gap to settlement, meaning that on the Sunday reopen, we have not yet tested our 31.5 prior settle. So that's important. We began last week like that as well. So we just, and in my primary scenario, it kind of noted that. So if we hold this gap to settle open, then to me it becomes a lot more likely that either we coil and get that primary scenario for a takeout of these highs. But if we, like I said, weekly break this high or don't break this high and we start getting back into settle, that'll be a key bellwether. So I'm flagging that open settlement to kind of be aware of the importance of that test today, which we saw last week. There was a period a few months back where for like several weeks in a row, we would leave settlement open on a Monday, Sunday reopen, Monday, we'd leave settlement open and we would trend pretty hard away from it. That happened a few times in the past few months, and last week we basically did that. Our settlement from last week or 2 weeks ago is 5,003 3/4. It's untested, so just be aware of that as an extra kind of clue for what we get today. But I'm going to wrap this up now. Once again, we're running long. That's kind of my trademark, I guess, but we'll continue to work and improve on production issues. Now we've moved to our final location, which is my upstairs office, so that'll help out with things. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to wish everyone the best of luck. I hope you can find a way to be better today, and I hope you can find a way to make someone else smile today, because I really feel that is the best thing you can do on any individual day. All the best to you. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.